When I think about my favorite video games of all time, a lot of different eras and consoles come to mind. Narrowing everything I've ever played down to just 10 was extremely difficult, and this list isn't about what's objectively best, it's just about the games I had the most fun with and the ones that stuck with me the longest. This isn't your ranking, it's mine. If a game you love is missing or something you dislike made the list, that's totally fine. We don't share the same memories or preferences, and that's the entire point. These placements are purely personal and based entirely on my own experience, so just keep that in mind. Number 11, Resident Evil 4. Alright, so this is actually a top 11, not a top 10 because I just couldn't leave this game out of the actual ranking, even though I will have honorable mentions later on. I don't talk about it much on this channel, but I'm a huge Resident Evil fan, and what's funny about that is I didn't grow up with the series much. Like with most of my favorite games of all time, I played them as a kid, but I completely missed the series until I was a teenager. My first real experience with Resident Evil didn't happen until 2017 when I was already 14, when I played Resident Evil 7. I played the demo and thought it seemed interesting, so I gave it a try and never looked back. I remember being tense it was just walking through the Baker mansion, second guessing every corner, and feeling like the game was constantly one step ahead of me. Jack Baker, especially in those early hours, just made the game feel unpredictable in a way I wasn't used to at the time. And for a few years, Resident Evil 7 was the Resident Evil game to me. I would play the remakes, which I love too, like I really love Resident Evil 2, but I didn't play Resident Evil 4 for a while after that. The tank control scared me off, and I kept telling myself I'd just wait for the remake since it was bound to happen with the 2 and 3 remakes being successes. Eventually, in 2021, I just stopped putting off and finally played the original, and almost immediately realized how badly I misjudged it. Leon might be the unintentionally funniest protagonist I've ever played as. Like, his one-liners still make me laugh.
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
And the locations in this game are just burned into my memory in a way that's hard to explain. The opening village sequence is still one of the most iconic introductions in gaming. Like, who doesn't remember when everyone left to play bingo or the big cheese showing up? The castle somehow keeps escalating in absurdity without losing its identity. Salazar, whose right hand comes off, is also just another hilarious villain. Even the weaker sections like the mines still stick with me because of how distinct everything feels. Now, it's not a survival horror game in the traditional sense, and I know it helped push the series in a more action-heavy direction that a lot of people don't like, but I generally love that style just as much. The combat is satisfying even with tank controls. The puzzles feel clever without slowing things down, and the pacing keeps you moving forward without ever feeling rushed. This game can honestly be higher, and I think Resident Evil 7 and the Resident Evil 2 remake also could have been on this list. I thought about it for a long time what I wanted to include, but eventually I just decided to go with 4. And also, I've never actually played the 4 remake. I do own it, but I've just never gotten around to playing it. Maybe I'll even like that better. Number 10, BioShock. BioShock is one of those games I wish I could experience again for the first time. I still remember exactly how it felt stepping out of the bathysphere into Rapture, and realizing that this place had a history long before you arrived. The buildings, the flickering lights, the sound design, it immediately felt like a world that had lived and died before you ever touched it. The sense of atmosphere pulled me in way more than any tutorial or opening cutscene really ever has before. As I played through the game, what really stuck with me was how naturally the story unfolded. You're not constantly being stopped and told what happened, but you're more piecing it together yourself through audio logs and environmental details. I remember stopping in random rooms just to listen to recordings and just trying to understand how things spiraled so badly. Andrew Ryan stands out to me as one of the strongest antagonists I've ever encountered in a game. Not because he's always present or the strongest, but because his ideas are everywhere. Like, you could feel his influence in every part of the city, so it makes him feel a lot bigger than he actually is. Gameplay-wise, BioShock still holds up for me. Mixing plasmids with weapons never gets old, and there's something incredibly satisfying about experimenting with different combinations and approaches. Big Daddies are iconic for a reason. The first time you hear one stomping around while guarding a little sister is super intimidating, and even later in the game, that sound still made me stop and think before engaging. And then there's the twist. Like, if you've played BioShock, you already know what I'm talking about. It completely reframed how I looked at everything I'd done up to that point, and it stuck with me way past when the credits rolled. BioShock was one of the first games that made me realize how powerful environmental storytelling can be, and it changed the way I looked at narrative-driven games going forward. Now, I really love 2 and Infinite as well, and Infinite's twist, including the one in the DLC, were absolutely incredible as well, but I still feel the original is the best. Now, would you kindly give these games a chance if you haven't yet? You could get the collection of all 3 games for like $10 on the Switch. Number 9, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. When I ranked The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom as number 1 on my Zelda ranking, I had a lot of angry commenters. Like, you could just see the anger in their souls from the comments they were leaving, and I was just thinking how ridiculous it is to be so mad at a stranger's opinion of a video game that doesn't affect you at all. I know Tears of the Kingdom isn't the most unique game, but it just felt like a better version of Breath of the Wild to me, which was already one of my favorite games ever. What surprised me the most was how different the world felt despite being very familiar. Sure, the main map wasn't too different, but the Sky Islands completely changed how I approached exploration exploration, and the depths added this constant feeling of unease that we really haven't seen in a while in a Zelda game, at least in my opinion. I remember the first time I dropped into the depths and realized how little visibility I had and how uncomfortable it makes you. Also, unlike the Sky Islands, which we knew existed, the depths were just not part of the marketing at all. We had no idea these existed, so Nintendo just casually doubled the size of the map without telling anyone. I will say that the depths are far from perfect. It can be annoying to traverse, and there isn't too much enemy variety. The new abilities are the heart of the game. Ultra Hand alone fundamentally changed how I interacted with everything. I spent so much time building contraptions that probably weren't even efficient, but the game encouraged it. Constantly rewarded experimentation, even when my solutions were messy. There's so many moments where I solved something in a way that felt completely unintended, only to realize that was exactly the point. Now for the story, I actually did prefer Tears of the Kingdom over Breath of the Wilds, and I know that's kind of controversial. I really did like the time travel aspect to it, and learning about ancient Hyrule. The dungeons were far better than the Divine Beast, and the customization was much better here. This was honestly just some of the most fun I ever had with a video game, even though according to some commenters that isn't allowed. Like, yes, this is not a traditional Zelda game. I love both formulas. I love the Breath of the Wild style games, I love the traditional Zelda games, and I try to look at them on their own. But even with that, I'm told I have to hate this game because a certain YouTuber said it was bad. If you don't like it, that's totally fine. I can see why someone may not like the more open style of Zelda games, because there still is something very special about the other Zelda games that aren't as open. Like, they have more curated adventures, and they're great for what they are. Like, these are some of the best games of all time, but I also love what Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild did. And just a side note, I think telling someone they're not a fan of the Zelda series because they like a certain game, and this isn't just for me, I've seen commenters say this on other videos to other people, I just think that's very toxic, it's very narcissistic, and that does not do anything to get more people into Zelda games. I think we should just be encouraging people to enjoy the series and find what games they personally like. Sorry about the rant, but I've just seen this on a bunch of other Zelda rankings I've watched, and I just wanted to call this out. Number 8, Fallout New Vegas. New Vegas is a game that grew on me over time rather than just immediately clicking. I didn't play it at launch, I played it first in 2016, so it was already pretty clunky then, which was 6 years after release. The combat isn't great, and even wasn't great at the time. The game was buggy like any Bethesda game, and visually it wasn't exactly blowing me away. But the more time I spent with it, the more time I realized that none of that was what the game was really about. What pulled me in was how much freedom the game gives you without constantly drawing attention to it. Almost every quest has multiple solutions, and the game rarely tells you which one is correct. You can talk your way out of situations, side with people you probably shouldn't, or just completely ignore major plot threads if you want to. Like, I remember finishing certain quests and thinking that that was it, not because they were disappointing, but because the game trusted me to live with the outcome instead of just trying to really push me in one direction. The writing is what really elevates New Vegas for me. The factions feel flawed in believable ways, and there's no clear good versus evil path. Like, a lot of games that give you multiple endings or give you multiple factions to choose, like, they make it so one of them is obviously the good guys, but all of them are incredibly flawed here. And I think really besides Caesar's Legion, you could try to make an argument for any of them. You know, maybe even you can make an argument for Caesar's Legion if you're true to Caesar. Anyway, I just spent way too much time thinking about decisions after I made them. Like, I wonder if I picked the least bad option rather than the right one, because I did try to have a high karma playthrough of this. I tried to be moral. There was still a lot of that moral gray area that did stick with me more than really any big cinematic moment ever could. Then outside of just decision making, we gotta talk about the map. Now, visually it can be pretty barren, but the real star of the show here is the New Vegas Strip. Everyone who has played this game remembers getting enough caps to go into the strip for the first time and seeing all the different casinos and then meeting Mr. House. There's so much to do here, and you can play this game for a ridiculous amount of time. I don't want to spoil too many missions, but I believe that this is the best in the series when it comes to that. Like, a lot of these have lasting impacts and can really change how you progress in the game. I really love Fallout 3 and 4, but the factions in them aren't nearly as fleshed out as New Vegas, and that's part of what makes New Vegas so unique and such a great RPG. This is one of the games I'd love to see remade the most, because it is one of the greatest RPGs of all time, and could just use some polish. Number 7, Red Dead Redemption 2. Red Dead 2 is one of those games I didn't fully appreciate while I was playing it, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I just didn't realize how deeply it was sinking in until I was already dozens of hours deep into it. This game came out over 7 years ago, and it's still one of the most densely packed games I've ever played. Riding my horse from place to place never felt like downtime. Like, I didn't really want to use fast travel, I just wanted to ride my horse. It just felt like a lot of the time I'd put a marker on the map and then completely forget about what I actually was going to, because I'd get distracted by something random along the way. What really stuck with me was the camp. Sitting around listening to conversations, hearing Dutch talk about another plan that's definitely going to work this time. Watching the mood shift as things slowly start to unravel. It all felt like this game was actually alive and not just static, if that makes sense. Even early on, you can feel that something is wrong. Like, there's this constant tension in the background that never really goes away, and the game lets it sit there instead of spelling everything out immediately. Arthur Morgan is a huge reason this game is here also. He's one of the most real protagonists I've ever played as. He feels like a real human being and not some caricature which you might expect from a cowboy game. Even small things like riding alone while the music kicks in, stopping to help a stranger on the side of the road, or doing something small that doesn't really matter in terms of progression, just all added up over time. By the later chapters, I was invested in who Arthur was and where things were heading, even knowing it wasn't going to end well. Like, remember, you could also choose what type of man Arthur is. Like, you could have a lot of honor or a little, and that does actually change things. And then the world itself is ridiculous in terms of detail. There are so many moments where I stopped and thought that no other game would even bother doing this. Like, there's a very famous detail with the horses I'm not going to get into here, but that's just used as an example of the incredible amount of detail the developers put into this. Random encounters feel natural, side quests feel worth your time, and the game constantly rewards you for slowing down and paying attention. Is the mission design a little rigid? Yeah, I completely understand why some people might bounce off this game, but for me, Red Dead 2 is one of the rare games that felt like an experience rather than just something I was trying to beat. It stuck with me in a way very few open world games ever have, and I don't want to spoil this game and all, but the ending and everything that led up to it is honestly some of the most emotion I've ever felt in a video game. Number 6, The Last of Us. So this is not the best games in terms of gameplay. I thoroughly enjoyed the gameplay, but that's not what makes it one of my favorite games of all time. I just love the grand adventure feeling of the game, where you just travel across the country and encountering different threats while trying to deliver a girl who's immune to the cordyceps to doctors who can try and find a cure. I'm sure a lot of you already know the concept of this game, but for those of you who don't, it starts with a fungus outbreak that causes people to basically turn into zombies, and you see how everything went down in the beginning. You immediately get hit with an emotional gut punch, and then are taken 20 years in the future. You play as Joel and shortly after meet Ellie, and their relationship carries the entire game. Watching them slowly go from strangers who don't trust each other to something that feels like family is just handled so naturally. Quiet moments stuck with me just as much as the big set pieces. Walking through abandoned cities, listening to optional dialogue, reading notes left behind by people who didn't make it, all of it added weight to the world in a way that felt grounded and believable. The villains here are great too. Like, most of them don't feel like cartoon villains where they're just purely evil. A lot of them have motivations, and a lot of them have just changed because of how the world made them change. Now, gameplay-wise, I loved how tense everything felt. Resources are scarce, encounters feel dangerous, and every mistake matters. You're encouraged to play cautiously, not because the game tells you to necessarily, but because you have to. That tension never really lets up, and it fits the tone perfectly. I also did love the customization. Like, you could customize your weapons in this, you could choose what guns you really want to focus on, and depending on the difficulty you play on, this game can be a good challenge. It's really hard to find a good story game like this that is not open world, it's a linear game, but it's just such a great curated adventure and just has this vibe about it that's really almost unmatched in video games. Then there's the ending, which obviously I won't spoil, but it's one of the most uncomfortable endings in gaming, and that's why it works. It doesn't give you easy answers, and it doesn't try to justify everything for you. It's up to you to decide if you feel it was a good ending or not. The Last of Us stayed in my head long after I finished it, and that lingering discomfort and just thinking about everything that happened in it is exactly why it's this high on my list. Now, I did play The Last of Us Part 2, and I actually really liked the gameplay. I liked it better, but the story didn't reel me in even close to as much as the first. It felt like a game about hate and revenge compared to the more hopeful feeling of the first game. I really think this is one of those games that not everyone's gonna love, but if you like the style of game, if you could get emotionally invested in the story, it's truly one of the best games of all time. Number 5, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. So speaking of my Zelda ranking, I actually had Ocarina at 2 last time, but since the top 5 for me are all incredibly close and change constantly, I was actually thinking I do like Ocarina of Time better. It's constantly labeled as one of the greatest games ever made, and while I agree with that, that's not why it's here. It's on this list because even now, going back to it still feels meaningful to me. What really stands out when I play this is how well paced the entire experience is. The transition from young Link to adult Link is still one of my favorite moments in gaming. The world changes in meaningful ways, locations you remember from earlier suddenly feel different, and the game does so much storytelling without relying on long cutscenes or walls of dialogue. The dungeons are a huge reason this game has stayed with me for so long. The Forest Temple's atmosphere, the Shadow Temple's unsettling tone, the Spirit Temple structure, truly some of my favorite dungeons, and the music ties everything together in a way that still works decades later. Zelda's Lullaby, the Song of Storms, Grotto Valley, these tracks instantly just take me back to specific moments in the game. Yes, it's shown its age. I originally played the 3DS version. Even on that, the graphics are dated, and the controls aren't as smooth as modern Zelda games, but none of that really bothers me when the core experience is this strong. Ocarina of Time is a game I really don't need to say too much about because everyone already knows how great it is. It's just a masterclass of video game design that is truly timeless, no matter when you play this game, no matter if you played it when it first came out or you're playing it now nearly 30 years later. It's just a beautiful video game. Number 4, I'm going with Super Mario 64 and Mario Odyssey here. So I'm cheating here by putting two games together, but I want to include both, and I still want to talk about other games in my top 10. So these both represent completely different eras of my life, but they made me feel the exact same way when I played them. Super Mario 64, especially the DS version, which was my first real game. I remember running around Peach's castle, jumping into paintings, experimenting with Mario's movement, playing as Luigi, Wario, and Yoshi since, like I said, I played the DS version first. I spent so much time doing the same levels over and over again, and looking back, the D-pad instead bit of actual 3D movement is very clunky, but when I was 4 years old I didn't care about that. And then Mario Odyssey, which I played when it first came out, gave me that exact same feeling years later. The movement is flawless here, like this is some of the best movement we've ever had in a 3D platformer, and the game constantly rewards curiosity. Capturing enemies completely changes how you approach each area, and there's always something hidden just out of view. Remember getting distracted constantly, going for one moon and ending up finding 5 along the way. So why do I have both these games so high up, and why do I have them together? It's because for years, since 2017, I've gone back and forth on which one I think is better. I think they're both incredible games. I like Super Mario 64 for a lot of this nostalgia. It gives me a lot of the creative level designs, how rewarding it was to actually get a star. And I love Mario Odyssey for the big open worlds it has, for the capture mechanic game, as well as the movement being incredible. Like, there were so many challenges I used to do back in the day, whether it was with roll cancel vectoring or the Cappy long jumping. It just feels incredible to play. And when it comes down to it, you play a video game for fun. Like, these games may not be the deepest games of all time, but they're some of the most fun video games ever. And it really just comes down to if you like 3D platformers, because if you do, it's hard to have a bad time with these. If you want to hear me talk about these a little more, I have a ranking going over all the Mario games, so be sure to check that out as well if you're a big Mario fan. Number 3, Super Paper Mario. So unlike all the other games on this list, which are usually considered to be all-time great games by people, Super Paper Mario is a game I completely understand not even having in someone's top 50 or top 100 if they've. But for me, I just played this at the perfect time in my life, and I don't think it would have landed the same way if I played it earlier or later. This was the first Paper Mario game I played. I didn't play the Thousand Year Door before it. I had played a Mario RPG with Superstar Saga. But when I went into this, there was just something about it that hooked me instantly. The incredible story, which I even realized how great it was when I was a kid. The humor, the art style, the music, there's a lot here. This is a Mario game that isn't afraid to sit with its heavier ideas, whether it's loss, fate, loneliness, love. The story with Count Bleck and his relationship with Tippy are at the center of the story without you even realizing it. I remember being caught off guard by how much the story actually plays into the game. There's things like the flipping mechanic, which is very simple and it's not utilized as best as it can be, but it's used in ways that constantly made me feel clever. It's just always satisfying. The game isn't perfect, and it's objectively not the best Paper Mario game, but I still love it the best. It is an RPG, like there is RPG mechanics here, there is leveling up, but of course this is just more simple platforming rather than traditional turn-based combat, but that's not what made me love this game. I love the environments, I love the characters, I love the million text boxes in this game. I've played this game so many times, and every time I realize something new about it. I have a video that's in the works right now that may or may not be out about what makes Super Paper Mario so great, so if you want to know more about my opinions on that, go check it out, because I could talk about this game for a while, but I do have quite a few more games to get to. Number 2, Super Mario Galaxy 2. On a purely mechanical level, this is one of the best platformers ever made. It's refined to an absurd degree. There's almost no filler, there's no wasted ideas, no moments where the game feels like it's stalling for time. Every Galaxy introduces a concept, explores it just enough, and then moves on before it can wear out its welcome. I got Galaxy 2 the day it came out, and I was impressed by how much was in this game after playing the original Galaxy. The game doesn't need long introductions or explanations. It assumes you understand how Mario works and just trusts you to keep up. The difficulty of parts is noticeably higher than the first Galaxy game, especially in the later sections, but it never feels unfair. When you mess up, it's very clear that it's on you, and that made improving feel incredibly satisfying. Unlike the original Galaxy, the Galaxy heroes are typically much bigger and have a little more variety to them, and depending on how you feel, that could be a pro or con. But what ultimately keeps Galaxy 2 out of the top spot for me isn't anything it does wrong, it's more about what it doesn't do. Like, it doesn't have the same feel as the original Galaxy, where it has those quieter, more atmospheric moments, where it has that emphasis on story and a little more downtime, where it has that incredible hub world. Galaxy 2 kind of moves in that direction where story isn't important, where the hub world isn't as important. And this is still, obviously, one of my favorite games of all time if I have it at number 2, but there are just some things I feel were missing a little bit here. But the actual gameplay, I think you could argue, is better than the original Galaxy. Like, all the Galaxies here are just incredible, and some of the ideas here, like the cloud power-up, are some of the best we've seen in the series. Before getting to number 1, there's a handful of games I need to talk about that didn't quite make the top 10 or top 11, but still meant a lot to me. Some of these were extremely close to cracking the list, others are here because, even though I love them, games above just hit me at slightly more important moments in my life where I just like them better, and I feel like this list would be incomplete if I didn't mention these. Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door. This is the game that people probably expected to see in my top 10 more than anything else. The Thousand Year Door is incredible, and I will never argue with anyone who calls it their favorite Mario RPG. This game, like I said, is objectively better than Super Paper Mario, but I just have a personal preference for which game I like. The writing is consistently funny, the characters are instantly memorable, and it strikes that perfect balance between being lighthearted and surprisingly emotional. What really stands out to me is how distinct every chapter feels. The game constantly reinvents itself without losing its identity. You go from solving a mystery on a haunted train, which is the best chapter, to climbing a massive tree, to literally becoming a pro wrestler with an audience reacting to your fights. Oh yeah, and that's not exclusive to that chapter because the audience is with you the entire game, and that was just a cool feature, which helps make this the best combat system in content in the entire series. The partners here are easily the best that the series has ever had. Everyone feels useful, not just in combat, but in the overworld as well, and they all have strong personalities that make them feel like actual characters instead of mechanics. Uncharted 2 and Uncharted 4. I'm just grouping these together because they represent my two favorite in the series and they're incredibly close. Uncharted 2 was the game that showed me what the series was capable of. Like, that opening train sequence immediately set the tone, and the pacing throughout the entire game is incredibly tight. It felt cinematic without constantly taking control away from the player, and the adventure here is one of the grandest we've ever seen. And like with The Last of Us, I just love when games have that adventure feeling to them. I just love how effortlessly fun this was. The characters were likable, the set pieces were insane, and the game never overstayed its welcome. Uncharted 4, on the other hand, was a bit more emotional. It was the definitive ending to Nathan Drake's story. The gameplay is more refined, the environments are larger and more open, and the quieter moments are where the game really shines. The relationship between Nate and Sam adds a lot of emotional weight, and the game takes its time letting these moments breathe. These games aren't about player freedom or deep mechanics. They're about the pacing, the presentation, and having that kind of Indiana Jones feel that I just love in media. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. This was one of the most refreshing gaming experiences I've ever had. The first time you step out onto the Great Plateau and see Hyrule stretched out in front of you, it immediately communicates that this is a different kind of Zelda game. There's no strict path, there's no constant guidance, and no pressure to play a certain way. I spent an absurd amount of time just wandering, climbing mountains to see what was at the top, stumbling into enemies I was absolutely not ready for, and finding shrines in the middle of nowhere. It just all felt like genuine discoveries. For a while, this was one of my top two favorite Zelda games, but personally, I just think Tears of the Kingdom just added a lot more content. Breath of the Wild definitely had that new factor that was special and Tears of the Kingdom didn't have, but just looking at these games individually, I just like Tears of the Kingdom better. But still, both these are absolutely worth playing. Detroit Become Human. So I've been a fan of these kinds of games for a while. I like a lot of the Telltale games. Like, I recently played the Walking Dead games and I love those. I played Minecraft Story Mode. I played Tales from the Borderlands, which is still one of few PlayStation games I've ever gotten a platinum trophy for. And I've played other games from David Cage as well, like Heavy Rain. But Detroit Become Human fully commits to the idea of player choice, and unlike a lot of story-based games like the ones I mentioned, those choices actually matter. Like, they're not just small dialogue options. Entire storylines can change or disappear depending on what you do, and that level of branching is genuinely impressive. My favorite was Connor's storyline. Watching how his character could develop or completely fall apart based on your decisions made replaying the game incredibly tempting. You're constantly aware that small choices can have massive consequences later on, and that creates a level of tension that never really goes away. I've never seen a game have so many choices actually matter. Now, this isn't like a traditional video game where there's super in-depth gameplay, but what is here is incredible for what it is. Like, this is a true choose-your-own-adventure type game. Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 7. So these two games represent the moments where Resident Evil completely reinvented itself and succeeded. Resident Evil 2, especially the remake, which is the one I played, is survival horror done right. The Raccoon City Police Department is one of the best designed locations in gaming. Being hunted by Mr. X never stops being stressful. Every bullet matters, every decision feels important. Resident Evil 7 is the game that made me a fan of the series. The shift to first person changed everything. The Baker Mansion feels claustrophobic and unpredictable. And those early hours where you barely understand what's happening are extremely terrifying. Jack Baker is one of the most memorable horror villains in gaming, and the game knows exactly how to use him. These games remind me why atmosphere and tension can matter more than constant action in horror games, even though I personally prefer Resident Evil 4 just a little bit. Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga. This was the first Mario RPG I played, and it's still one of the most charming RPGs Nintendo has ever made. The writing is funny, the animations are full of personality, even though they're on the Game Boy Advance. The game constantly finds ways to keep even simple interactions engaging. This gave Mario & Luigi even more distinct personalities, and it did so without relying on traditional dialogue. The combat system is simple but active. Dodging enemy attacks keeps battles engaging, and never feels like you're just selecting menu options on autopilot. The music is fantastic, the B&B Kingdom is memorable, and the entire game feels playful from start to finish. This is one of those games I can replay at almost any time and still enjoy just as much. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. This feels like a celebration of gaming history. This roster is absolutely absurd. The stages are packed with references, the sheer amount of content is overwhelming in the best possible way. Whether you play it casually with items or competitively, it's just a fantastic game. Even 7 years later, I'll still play this, whether it's friends, whether it's online, whether it's messing around in different modes. I truly believe this is the best fighting game ever made. Silent Hill 2. This is one of the most unsettling games I've played, and also one I only played a few months ago. It doesn't necessarily rely on constant danger or jump scares, even though they are there. The fog, the sound design, the empty spaces just all work together to create a sense of dread, and that never goes away. The story is what elevates it. It's very psychological, it's tragic, and it's personal in a way that very few games feel like. The town feels less like a location and more like a reflection of the character's guilt and trauma, which, spoiler alert, that's what it is. It's uncomfortable to sit with, and that's exactly why it works. I never played the original, I only played the remake, but it was an incredible game, and something that I needed to watch like hours of YouTube videos on. I think this will be a game that sticks with me me for a very long time. There's so many games I could include in honorable mentions, like Super Mario World, Yoshi's Island, BioShock 2 and BioShock Infinite, Mario Super Sluggers, Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, Pokemon Omega Ruby, Tomodachi Life, New Leaf. There's so many I could include here. If you want to ask me in the comments if I played a game and I give you my thoughts on that. But if I included every single game that I've wanted to include here, this video would be like 2 hours long. And at number 1, you probably know what it is by now. It's Super Mario Galaxy. This is my favorite game of all time, and honestly, it's never been that hard for me to decide. Other spots on this list move around depending on the day, but this one has been at number 1 for years for me. I remember playing this game for the first time when I got my Wii, and it immediately felt like it was different from anything I'd played before. The moment the orchestral music kicks in, you step onto that first planetoid, and everything just feels quiet in a way that Mario games usually aren't. Space feels lonely, but not empty. The game gives you room to breathe, and that atmosphere stuck with me in a way that I didn't even realize at the time. The music is a huge part of that. This is easily my favorite Mario soundtrack, and honestly one of my favorite soundtracks in gaming. Tracks like Gusty Garden Galaxy are just incredible, but even the calmer pieces do so much emotional work. Rosalina's Storybook, which I finally have as a physical copy now, hit me way harder than I expected. It's simple, but it adds this layer of reflection that you usually don't associate with a Mario game. It made the whole experience just feel more personal, like there was something quietly sad underneath all the color and creativity. Gameplay-wise, this game's incredible. The gravity mechanics completely change how platforming works, but they're introduced so naturally that it never feels overwhelming. Every galaxy feels distinct, and the ideas never wear out their welcome. I can still picture specific levels in my head instantly, whether it's buoy-based galaxy, space junk, final galaxy, and that doesn't happen with most games, even the ones I love. I'll sometimes forget about certain areas, but I feel like I remember everything in Galaxy. What really puts Galaxy above everything else for me is just how it makes me feel every single time I come back to it. No matter when I replay it, I just get the same sense of wonder. Doesn't matter how many Mario games I've played since or how much gaming has changed, it just still feels special. And I prefer this to Galaxy 2 just because I like the quieter tone of it, I just like the vibe of it, and I like how the game will slow down sometimes compared to Galaxy 2 that just feels like a much faster game. But still, both these games are incredible, you can't go wrong with either one. And that's my list, my 10 or 11 favorite games of all time plus honorable mentions. A lot of these I could easily swap depending on the day. Really any of 10 through 5, I feel like I could swap at some point just thinking about it more. This list was just about games that personally mattered the most to me, and I'm expecting you to disagree with it. You'll probably agree with a couple of these on here, but there may be some here that you've never played, there may be some that you weren't the biggest fan of, and that's totally okay, because this is a 100% personal list. It's not meant to say any of these games are objectively better than any other games. This is a list for me to just talk about the games that meant the most to me, and I hope that you enjoyed me making a very personal list rather than something that just tries to appeal to people, because I know there's a lot of lists like that going over the top 10 best games of all time and trying to use objectivity for that, but this is just how I feel about these games. So if you're commenting what a joke, because I chose a game you don't like, or saying how the list is invalidated, you're just completely missing the point. I do want to know your list in the comments though, what games had the biggest impact on you, and what games on here do you agree with, what games do you want to give a try? Let me know in the comments. Be sure to join my Discord and subscribe, as well as like this video. Thank you for watching Domainy, and I'll see you next time.